Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be scaping this ADA30C aquarium, only I'm going to be creating a terrarium, but I'm going to be coming at it from a sort of aquascaping approach. So essentially it's kind of going to look like how I would aquascape this aquarium, only I'm going to be using sort of like terrarium plants or terrarium moss and obviously maintaining it and setting it up as a terrarium. And this is just because I want something that's low maintenance, something that I don't have to trim or perform water changes on every week. But kind of gives the aesthetic and the vibe of an aquascape. So I don't know if this is going to work, but I guess time will tell. So to begin with here, all I'm doing is sort of testing out the wood and rocks that I've got. As you've seen, I'm using Redmoor root wood and some elderly stone. And I'm just kind of trying to find the best sort of layout for this piece of wood. I originally wanted it to sort of sit coming from the left, but after sort of lots of like trial and error and just, placing it in different positions, it just kind of looked best like this. So it wasn't really the position that I wanted to scape it in, but sometimes you've just kind of got to go with what the wood's telling you. So in the end, I created this sort of composition. So it's a very sort of like typical, I don't know, I guess nature style vibe. And I'm just going to sort of glue everything together. This is just so that if I do have to do any maintenance, if I knock it, it's not just going to fall apart, and it just keeps things in position and a bit sturdier while we're scaping. So with all that done, I'm just going to fill the back up with some gravel. Now this is one, because it'll just give a bit of extra height and it's cheaper to use gravel, but two, it's going to act like a drainage layer. And then I'm going to cap that with some aqua soil. And this is just because this soil will probably be part submerged underwater. There will be a thin layer of water in the bottom. So I guess it's almost a bit like a paludarium, I guess. And then on top of this, we will then go in with some more sort of appropriate terrarium soil. And in there we can plant things like moss. But this bottom layer, it's just all kind of means that if water does get into it, it's not going to go like stagnant or rot, because obviously the gravel underneath and the aqua soil can be submerged in water and it's fine, but the terrarium soil not so much. So it kind of just gives it that sort of like pedestal, I guess, to sit on. And just sort of like takes it up above what the water level is actually going to be. So I just sort of like laid that in the background and kind of steeped it up a little bit. These are all skills and all techniques that you would do when you were aquascaping, and minus that terrarium soil, if you just went ahead and skipped that bit out, essentially what you've got is an aquascape, and you could use aquatic plants and plant this up as an aquarium. But as it stands, yeah, we're going down the terrarium route, and there's no going back now because we've added the terrarium soil. So next up, I'm just adding some more detail stones and also just a few extra twigs to the piece of wood just to give it a little bit more interest. I added a piece on the left, which later on the video you'll see that I actually removed because it actually didn't add anything. In fact, I think it made it look a little bit worse. So I did remove that sort of piece on the left there. But other than that, I think I only added sort of like 2 or 3 extra pieces. Next, I am adding some gravel. Again, this is just to stop any of the soil and anything else from the back coming into the front. And it's also going to act as like a nice transition layer, because in the front we're going to be going in with lots of different types of gravels and sand, and it'll just look sort of really natural in the foreground. Key to this kind of look is just to use as many gravels as you've got lying around and just essentially layer them up. Next, it was time to spray down the aquarium, so I'm just spraying down all of the soil, and I'm just going to keep going until a really small layer of water appears in the front of the tank. I'll probably keep it at this level. As you can see, that is a really manageable level. But if it turns out that the tank needs a little bit more humidity, I will just add more water. At this point, it's just sort of like seeing how it goes and a bit of trial and error. But from this point now, it's just kind of planting. So as you can see, I'm using cushion moss. I really love this moss. It's something that I've always struggled to grow, but I have found that if you put it under quite a good light, and as long as it's in a humid condition with a decent enough growing medium like the terrarium soil that I'm using, it does seem to do okay. I think my problem is that I actually wasn't giving it enough light in the past. So from what I can tell, it seems to highlight. So I'm just going to cover this back portion of soil with cushion moss. I did end up adding, which I later removed, but you will see it at some point in the video. You'll see a little plant poking out, but I did start adding photonias around sort of the base of the wood and in the soil. And for as much as I did like it, it started to then look more like a terrarium. And as mentioned, I wanted it to look a little bit more like an aquascape, but just without the water. So I ended up taking them out, but what I am going to be using is various epiphytes, so basically just Anubias and Bucephalandra. Now these can grow out of water providing that the conditions are right and the humidity is quite high. I have kept these Bus and Anubias out of water and just in a glass container for the last sort of month or so. So they are used to not being underwater, but they are used to being in really high humidity. And I am going to try and keep this as humid as I can. However, the glass is probably going to be constantly condensed. So I guess what I want to try and do is acclimate them and then make the gap, because it's going to have a lid on, but essentially just make the gap between the lid and the tank just smaller and smaller, so it's kind of got a place to vent, so that there's going to be less condensation in the glass, and these kind of get used to a lower humidity level. But again, this is all trial and error, so we will see. But as you can tell, I have planted the wood with pretty much Bus and Anubias, and I've also pinched some weeping moss out of the tank next to this little terrarium, and I'm just going to place that on the wood and in the foreground in the gravel, and hopefully that'll start growing up and meeting the cushion moss, and it'll create a really natural transition and just a really nice sort of mix of species, and hopefully it covers part of the wood too. I do actually like a lot of the wood being exposed in this. I think it does look really nice, but we'll just see what the moss does. And then in the front, I've just added a tiny bit of mini coin. So these Anubias that are in the bottom part where it's the most humid should be absolutely fine. It's more the top parts that I'm a little bit concerned about, but as mentioned, we will see. So the little twig that I mentioned that was here on the left, I did remove it. I think it kind of ruined the direction of the wood. So yeah, I do think it looks much better. And then I have just cut a thin piece of perspex for a lid. This is just to keep the humidity in, and I've left a little gap at the back, and this is what I was kind of talking about earlier. It's only small at the minute, so we're kind of getting max humidity. I can't push it all the way back because of the light stand. Maybe over time we can increase that gap and decrease the condensation that's going to occur. I guess time's going to tell with this one, but that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.